one day you're at the top of the world, the next day you're wondering, do we have a product anymore? Do we have a company? Certainly the last 2 years as well too, there's been so much elation about AI and the possibility and all those, which is great. I think it is already changing the world. The goal is AI is not a product. Blockchain is not a product that you sell, right? It is a way to solve someone's problem. I always mention, because we outsource a lot of our AI technology, I don't see a lot of value for a company to take ChatGPT and just slap it on the side of their platform.
Hi everybody, welcome to the Devico Breakfast Bar. Here we speak with different people involved in the business landscape, share their expertise, delve into the latest tech trends, and explore the ins and outs of IT outsourcing. I'm Oleg Sadikov, and today I'm excited to have Ryan Johnson, Chief Product Officer at CallRail. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss new episodes. Hi Ryan, and thanks for joining me today.
Hi Alec, thanks for having me.
Let's start our podcast with a little blitz. I start a sentence and you continue. Career in tech gave me
an exciting, evolving, ever-changing life, which has really brought a lot of different opportunities in many different ways.
Career in tech deprived me.
I would say for some of the early tech startups, it's time, right? Family time, time with friends, time on personal things. It's always a balance, but I think for certainly smaller startups, we've probably all been deprived a little bit of that time outside of work.
My main superpower is?
I love to solve problems and I love change, which is very common in our industry. So my superpower is to run towards the fire, figure out a plan, execute against it. And it's been probably the thing I've been best at in my career so far.
My main weakness is?
I would say there's still so much left to learn. So many things are changing in the tech world. It's trying to stay ahead of everything and feeling confident in that. And so it's something that I'm always like, gosh, do I really understand this stuff? And so I always feel like that's a weak part of like continually trying to educate myself so I understand the latest and greatest tech that's out there.
When I'm afraid,
it depends on the situation. So I think in certain situations, I embrace the fear. And I think in other situations, it's probably unlike my personality where I may be a little bit more timid or a little bit more quiet or a little bit more analyzing. So I think it's totally based on the situation for me.
Thanks, Ryan. That's all from my side.
Great.
It was amazing. Can you share some insights into your early career? What drew you to the field of technology and product development?
In university, I studied economics and management. I thought I was going to be an accountant. That was what I was studying for. When I came out of undergrad, I went into kind of traditional finance. I worked for a financial services firm. And just by happenstance, one of the folks I worked with, whose name was also Ryan, we became great friends. And he had started this digital marketing agency in his dorm room, doing SEO and SEM for law firms in the early 2000s. And by happenstance, I had actually taken a CS class in college as one of my electives. So I had a pretty decent body of knowledge at that point in time of HTML and in some other languages, lots that are not used today. And he said, hey, I'll teach you the ins and outs of paid media and SEO optimization, all those types of things. And so that was my first taste into technology. And with him, I started managing engineers and projects, and as the company grew, my responsibilities grew. And then from there, I kind of ping-ponged back to finance for a little bit, but in that sense, it was still focused on technology. So I was helping a company really transform their internal engineering and product development org from a traditional waterfall software development to Agile and Scrum almost, 12, 15 years ago. So very early in my career, I saw a lot of like, how do you influence change? How do you learn from all these challenges, especially in a big organization? And so, I think that early part, all those learnings really helped in the future with my career as I progressed through in the tech industry.
If you knew markup languages like HTML and so on, why didn't you become a web developer?
That's a great question. I feel at that time, certainly the tech landscape was different. We just went through the dot-com bubble. This was the early 2000s, so there was no, if I wanted to be a developer, I honestly probably would have had to go back to school and do the traditional CS path. There were no boot camps and all these programs that we have today that are wonderful, both virtual and on-site and hybrid. So if I wanted to pursue that, I think the way my mind worked then would be have to go back to university, get a traditional CS degree. Looking back, would I have needed to do that? Probably not. There's a lot of amazing engineers I've worked with that come from all types of backgrounds. So there's that aspect, but I also think I was just more drawn to the bigger picture stuff with product development. Like I understood those things. And because I studied finance and accounting, and I understood the business impact side as well. So it's just made more sense in my head than I would say trying to go and become a developer, which I think would have been a steep curve for me. And I don't think I would have been very great at it long term.
Can you share any inspiring stories from your career that have had a lasting impact on you?
One that comes to mind that I share quite often is I was working for a tech startup here in Atlanta, Georgia called Vitru. This was in 2010, and I was actually hired inside of the engineering department as an engineering manager, although, again, my background was more focused on the product management side. And the leader that we had at the time was just amazing. And he said, listen, I'm hiring you as an EM that has a better product understanding because I'm building this very diverse set of engineering managers. One was a great engineer previously, understands architecture, all those types of things. And so he's going to focus on those things. This person over here is really good at project management. This person's over here is really good at infrastructure projects. I came in and the product person within engineering, which was fun. I think the thing that stuck with me the most often is he set very clear expectations of all of us, which was our job is to deliver software regardless of the challenges we have. So if we have a strong product manager or a weak product manager, he didn't care. He said, basically, go figure it out. If you have a more junior product manager, like you're going to have to get in the weeds with them to deliver good software to our customers. And so he was very pointed of there are not different expectations for different engineering managers. It was literally your job is to deliver software. You can't come in here and say, well, this is the challenge. And this certainly helped us through challenges, but we weren't able to essentially point the finger at a different part of the organization, which there was separate. UX and design was a separate group, engineering was a separate group, product managers was a separate group. And because of that, it's lasted through my career because I was like, gosh, he was so crisp in the messaging and the expectations, and it was actually a ton of fun. And my viewpoint, whether I had a very experienced PM or an inexperienced PM, it didn't matter because I thought, okay, if you're an inexperienced PM, great, I get to be more involved in this and shape the product more, even though I'm an engineering manager. Or if you're a very experienced product manager, I can help in different ways and probably learn from you. So it carried with me through everything of like, it's a partnership. It's very easy to point fingers because this stuff is very fluid and complex. But I just love that he set that expectation of like, this is what you are here for. You are good at figuring these things out. And that's just lasted through my whole career. It was very eye-opening, although I don't think it was a novel concept. It stuck with me for almost 15 years.
You have experience working with both startups and Fortune 100 companies. What are the key differences in your approach when working in these different environments?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I enjoy both for different reasons. So even in the startup world, I've worked at a company that was 3 or 4 people early in my career and went to companies that had 40 or 50, grew to a couple hundred. And then certainly at CallRail, where I'm at now, I think when I started, we went from 100 and we're over 300 right now. And then worked at Oracle, which was 110,000 employees at the time, through an acquisition. And so I think early stage startups, it's different. You have to have a different mentality, especially if you're going 0 to 1. There's a lot of trial and error. There's a lot of highs and lows. One day you're at the top of the world. The next day you're wondering, do we have a product anymore? Do we have a company? And so I think mentality wise going into that, like you just have to understand, even if you're not the founder or co-founder, like you're an entrepreneur at that size. If there's a handful of employees, like you're an entrepreneur, whether you like it or not. I think as you get out of the 0 to 1, so you're kind of growth company, maybe raised a couple $1 million, some of those pressures kind of come off of the highs and lows. And to me, that's really a game of like, how do you scale this company to be successful? Like, obviously, you've had success to get out of the 0 to 1 in revenue and all those types of things are growing. But how do you turn it into a successful technology company over the next 1 to 5 years? And so there's a lot of maturity phases in there. There's a lot of growing teams. It's certainly as like leadership roles that like I've been in recently with VP of product, CPO, those types of things. You realize like your job is to empower the team and support them. You're not in the mix anymore. Every detail like you might have been at a smaller startup. That's a whole different type of challenge and opportunity. And then when you get to like the Fortune 100 companies, my experience was unique because we came in through an acquisition. So I would say the first year they were pretty hands off. And then over time, you're kind of folded into the big machine. And I don't mean that in a negative way. It's just they have ways that they have to manage and control costs and deliver software, because they're a massive company. And so I think for me, it was like, okay, how can I still be successful? I was successful at a 100-person company. We got the company sold. But like, if I'm going to stick around, which I did for a couple of years, I had to think about, okay, what is different? Like we can't do the things we did before. So how can I learn from other people in the organization? How can I take our agility, but put it into their mature processes? And honestly, that was a lot of fun too. Like different, but you're working with all these people from different departments, from different corners of the world, in unique challenges of, how do I continue to deliver good software, but also make sure that we're not an annoyance for the big company. Like, I think give and take there.
CallRail serves more than 200,000 companies worldwide with its lead intelligence platform. How do you ensure that your solution meets the diverse needs of such a broad customer base?
Yeah, it's difficult. I think up until CallRail, I was primarily working inside of enterprise tech companies, and a lot of times the biggest deals or the biggest possibilities kind of dominate your roadmap for better or worse. And at CallRail, it's very different. We don't have those big voices. So we could have a challenge that comes from a small, medium business that's a real estate firm, and they're talking about this challenge here that they have today. And then we may have a customer that has a landscaping company and they have a challenge, and they use different words, right? Because they're in different industries. So we support the legal industry, healthcare, real estate, home services, and on and on and on. And so really from the product management side, our job of trying to say like, okay, we're getting all these inputs from these 200,000 plus customers. How do we solve the challenges that they have in a horizontal way? Because solving it for one of those 200,000 is not going to really help us scale and grow as a company. And it's just not feasible at our size. So it's how do I digest this information in different ways to say, oh, this person over here and this person over here and this agency over here, they're actually talking about the same thing. They're just using their nomenclature from their specific industry or vertical. And so then it's our job in product management to work in engineering and design and go to market of like, okay, how can we solve this horizontally? And it's fun. It's a different challenge because you'd be surprised about all the similarities that these companies have and then all the differences too. It's kind of things that you wouldn't necessarily expect.
How do you identify and prioritize real world problems that your product can solve?
This has always been close to me because I feel certainly the last 2 years as well too, there's been so much elation about AI and the possibility lows, which is great. Like I think it is already changing the world and faster than probably any of us have experienced with technology in our lifetime. Maybe the iPhone was the last time you really had some major disruption before, search engines and those types of things. So
Blockchain.
Yeah, blockchain's another great one. And so I think for me, it's like, how do you not get pulled into the hype, but make sure like, okay, we have to use this latest and greatest technology. Our customers are going to demand this at some point. And so for me, it's making sure that what we're delivering is not vanity. And the example I give all the time is I don't see a lot of value for a company to take ChatGPT and just slap it on the side of their platform. Most people don't know how to prompt. Most people won't even know what to do. It's a novel thing, and it's not really a product, right? And then so I look at like, okay, instead of giving open-ended prompt to customers, what are the problems they're trying to solve? In our world, it's intelligence of what's happening on the phone call. So it's narrowly defining and saying, you know what? Our customers really care about the outcome of the phone call. Like, was a sale made? Great. We can go and design a prompt behind the scenes. We can provide all this context. And then when the customer logs into their dashboard, they already see sale made, sale not made, those types of things. So I try to keep it simple. I try to keep it practical. And I also, most recently in the last year, we launched CallRail Labs. The whole point of it was to launch alphas that may not work, that we're testing. They're not productized. They're not something we can go and sell tomorrow. The whole purpose is to get it in front of customers early, to get feedback, so that we are making sure that we are delivering on the value that we say we are. And that's been a huge help too, because just changing so much that if you're not putting stuff out there in this iterative, fluid way, there could be a light switch moment. The next model that comes out is just dramatically better by 100x. Okay, great. Like, if we went all in on something, we may have to pivot to that. So yeah, I've always been focused on it. Again, with AI, with any of this stuff, blockchain, it's like, the goal is AI is not a product. Blockchain is not a product that you sell, right? It is a way to solve someone's problem. And I think that's what we always have to think about is like, okay, what is the problem we're trying to solve for our customers? Maybe it is solved with AI, maybe it's solved with machine learning, or maybe it's not. Maybe simple engineering logic may even give them better results.
How has the lead intelligence industry evolved in the recent years, and what trends do you see shaping its future?
I would say we've had a conversation intelligence product in market since 2016. And so I'll kind of start there. And the most basic aspect of it with leads is if you're getting inbound phone calls, which for many of these industries is the most important leads, they want to be able to analyze what was said on these phone calls that get recorded. And they want to do that at scale. And so 2016, very basic stuff, which was speech to text, right? And the models back then were not great. The transcripts were very error prone. It didn't understand certain nuances and punctuation. And so it was better than anything, previous to that, but it also wasn't great. So we used to get a lot of complaints like, hey, transcriptions are not accurate, doesn't really provide a lot of value until we can get the accuracy up. We were doing things like keyword spotting and those types of things, which were great, but if the base transcript wasn't good, the downstream wasn't good as well. And so kind of fast forward to 2 years ago, what was amazing is partnering with an AI company out there that we had already started transitioning our automatic transcription service through. They just had these massive step changes in their ASR models to where the transcripts were almost perfect. And so it changed things very drastically, very quickly, which allowed us to then say, okay, we have these wonderful transcripts, highly accurate, not a lot of errors. Let's go and run all this different intelligence on it that we couldn't really do before LLMs. So, things like detecting anything that's happening in the conversation. So it could be, did someone mention a referral? What is the summary of the call? If it's a half an hour call, people don't have time to, let alone listen, but read a full transcript. They need a quick summary of like, hey, what happened and like, what should I do about it? And I would say that's been like the last 2 years is how do we unlock the intelligence out of those conversations? So the second part of your question is like the future of where this is going. So I think it's going to go through every marketing channel in our world. So certainly, phone calls, but SMS, chats, social messaging. I think the big unlock for intelligence is a lot of companies use those in very disparate ways. But if you can bring that in and say, oh, I had a conversation with Alec on Facebook, and then he called my office over here, and then, we exchange SMS messages, like you have all the intelligence for you as the lead for that business. And I think that's where everything is going is like, okay, how can you combine all this stuff? How can you run all that intelligence on it And then how can you take that data and put it into places that people need? So whether it's a CRM that they use or a homegrown system of record, whatever it may be, but making sure that you can take all of that and move it there. And then I think you'll also see automation. So much as you're focused on the lead intelligence, how do you augment capturing those leads, whether it's with some of the advanced chatbots and those types of things, whether it's voice AI agents for after hours or those types of things. I think having those tools in the toolbox are going to be important in the lead intelligence space over the next few years as well.
IT outsourcing is a major trend in the tech industry. What are your thoughts on the advantages and disadvantages of outsourcing tech functions?
Yeah, I think certainly over the past 10 or 15 years, outsourcing has really become a way to unlock opportunities that maybe just take too long for a company to move on. Certainly in tech, it's tough, right? Like the past, except for the past year or two, like, but it's still tough to find really good talent in the market. So even if you said, hey, I'm going to go and hire this internally and do this, if it takes you 9 months, like it doesn't work. And so partnering with different types of outsourcing companies, and I look at outsourcing as very, very broad. It could be offshore, nearshore, onshore, whatever it may be. Like I think there's benefits to all of those, but I always mention, because we outsource a lot of our AI technology. I mentioned automatic speech recognition. That's with a partner, but I use that word very specifically. They're not a partner. They're not, or sorry, they are a partner. They're not a vendor. Like they have to understand our business. They have to do that. And the benefits are amazing, right? Like they wake up every day and they think about, okay, how can we make our ASR model better? We could try to go and build our own stuff internally, but we're not going to win. That's not what we wake up every morning thinking about. We wake up about how do we help our 200,000 customers market with confidence and turn those leads into customers. And so my experience with a CallRail and other areas, it's, I think it starts with a strategy of like, okay, we want to accomplish this. And then what are the different ways that we can accomplish that strategy? I think it's no different when people talk about build, buy, partner. I think it's the same thing. Like, do we want to build it internally because we already have the people? Do we want to partner? Do we want to outsource in different ways because they have a specialty? Could be in certain type of AWS infrastructure that they just know how to do it. So I think it becomes critical. It certainly becomes more, I think there's the balance of like, how early do you do that? And I think you see every flavor of that, right? I've seen startups where everything is outsourced on day one. I've seen companies like CallRail that we didn't really start our journey that, say, partnering with different companies to outsource and those types of things. Like CallRail's been around 12 years. We've been doing that maybe 4 or 5 years. And so, you kind of see everything in between. But the pros are like, listen, you can unlock talent very quickly. You can operationalize very quickly. You can get people that have very specialized skill sets that you may not have in your organization. And I don't always think about it as the primary thing, but certainly maybe you can optimize your cost and ROI, but I don't necessarily think that's the going in position with these relationships. It's just like, how do we solve this problem or this opportunity as fast as we can? I think the negatives to it are really just making sure you find the right partners, right? On both sides, right? I mean, if with your company, like you want to work with companies that understand your philosophies and how you think and the values that you have. And so I think the challenge is if you have an outsourced partner, like, are they truly a partner? And are you aligned in how you think and the goals and those types of things? And if you're not, then I think that's where the negative comes in. If you are, then I think there's lots of success stories out there utilizing these different types of partnerships.
Are there specific regions or countries that you find particularly promising for tech talent, and how do you navigate the challenges associated with the global talent pool?
This is a great question. I think it's been amazing to see over, I would say, even the last 5 years, how talent has really bled into almost every area of the world. I think in the early 2000s, if you said, oh, outsourcing, we'd probably say, oh, India, right? And that's just not the case, right? I mean, there's a lot of good talent in Europe, Eastern Europe. There's a lot of good talent in Asia. There's a lot of good talent in South America. And I really think what's happened is because of what I talked about earlier of, if you have a desire to be a developer there's just so many more tools at your disposal that maybe were not available 20 years ago or even 15 years ago. So it doesn't matter what part of the world you're in, you can do an online boot camp to learn Ruby on Rails, to learn AngularJS, any of those types of things. So I think that's what's exciting, is like how broad and vast it's gotten now. I think the challenge is educating companies like CallRail and say, hey, like these folks are really good at this. They could be in this region, so this is what we have to determine for time zones and all those types of things. Because I do see that, like certain parts of the world, folks are really, really good at a certain aspect of technology, could be due to access. And I think the bigger challenge, and I don't think this is unique to any, certainly not unique to CallRail, but any company, is just security, right? Like that's the thing that we hear first, is just, okay, we're giving GitHub repository access to folks that are thousands of miles away. How do we make sure that everything's secure on both ends of the spectrum, even yourselves? And so I think that's the challenge. I don't think that's new. I think it's gotten much better and easier to manage as well too. But depending on what part of the world you're in, different challenges from a security perspective come up. But I think in most cases they're all overcomable.
As we wrap up our conversation, what advice would you give to business leaders considering outsourcing as a part of their growth strategy?
So I would say start early. I think from what I've seen, I feel like a lot of people, it's a reactionary thing. Like, oh, we got to do this. We're not prepared. Okay, we need to partner in outsourcing. And then you're just scrambling, right? And you may not make the best decision. So I'd say for leaders, like think about it. Even if you don't want to go and do this today, have a conversation with these companies, have a conversations with folks like yourself and say, hey, we're thinking about this. Maybe it's a year from now, maybe it's 2 years from now, but you really need to educate yourself on what's available out there. So for me, it's like start early, have those conversations, build those relationships, because more often than not, what's going to happen is something's going to, boom, and then you have to react. Well, it's great if you've already built these relationships and contacts, because then you're like, oh, I know exactly who to go to. And then you've made so much progress in the relationship and understanding what's available with those resources and those types of things. So for me, it's start early, talk to a bunch of folks and get that, so that when you're ready, you're really focused on the execution side of it, focused on the analyzing whether this company is the right fit or not.
Thanks, Ryan. Thanks for joining me today. It was amazing. I enjoyed conversation with you.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
If you enjoy our discussion and want to stay updated on future episodes, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. That way you will not miss out on the latest insights and conversations from the Devico Breakfast Bar. See you in the next episode.